The dog went straight for her bag. Not mine, not my husband's. Hers. And the moment I saw the German Shepherd sit down hard beside that cream leather weekender tail, locked, ears forward, every line of its body saying, "Found it," I took a slow sip of my coffee and did not move a single muscle. My husband did. It was subtle. It would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent 17 years watching him perform. One sharp inhale, a half step forward that he caught and reversed before his foot fully landed. His hand found the metal divider beside him and gripped it once, hard, then let go. He had expected that dog to sit beside my bag. He had planned for it. He had counted on it. And now he was standing in the premium security lane at Harrington International at 6:40 in the morning, watching his entire future unspool in real time, while I finished my vanilla latte and waited. Her name was Serena. She was 32 years old, blonde, immaculate, wearing a cream wool coat that probably cost more than my first car. She was also, for the last 14 months, sleeping with my husband. And somewhere between midnight and 5 a.m., the locked metal case my husband had hidden inside my suitcase had quietly found its way into hers. She didn't know that yet. He didn't know that yet either. The TSA officer reached into the side compartment of her weekender. My husband, Daniel Archer, Senior Vice President of Finance at Meridian Pharma, decorated corporate executive, and the most convincing liar I have ever known, made a sound I had never heard from him before. Small, involuntary, swallowed fast. Too late. I want to tell you something before I tell you everything else. I am not the kind of woman who does things on impulse. I am a forensic compliance investigator. For 22 years, my job has been to sit across from men in expensive suits who are absolutely certain they have covered their tracks and quietly show them where they haven't. I trace money through shell companies. I follow forged signatures through document trails that look airtight until they don't. I watch men swear their books are clean while I hold the printout that proves otherwise. I do not panic. I do not react. What I do is watch. And what I had been watching for the better part of a year was my husband dismantle my reality one small, gentle sentence at a time. "You're exhausted, Claire. You're not thinking straight. You've been under so much pressure. Sweetheart, maybe you should talk to someone." He said it with so much warmth, so much patient, aching concern, the kind that makes you wonder, in the middle of the night, if you really are the problem. I almost believed him. Almost. Because here is what Daniel Archer never understood about me, about the specific kind of woman he had chosen to slowly erase for 17 years. I don't just watch, I document. And the night before our flight to London, when he thought I was asleep, I watched him kneel beside my suitcase in the dark and hide something inside it that was meant to destroy me. This is the story of what I did next. 3 months before the airport. A rainy Tuesday in September. I was standing in our kitchen at 6 in the evening, stirring a pot of risotto and watching the rain collect on the window in slow, uneven streams, when my phone buzzed with a fraud alert. I set down the wooden spoon and picked it up. A charge of $1,140. The Whitmore Hotel, downtown, that afternoon. I knew the Whitmore. Everyone in the city knew the Whitmore. It was intimate, wood-paneled, the kind of hotel that kept its lobby deliberately dim so that the people passing through it were harder to identify. It was not a conference hotel. It was not the kind of place Daniel used for work. It was the kind of place you booked when you didn't want to be seen. I set my phone face down on the marble counter and turned back to the risotto. When the front door opened 20 minutes later, I didn't move. "Hey," Daniel's voice, easy and warm, coming down the hallway. "Something smells incredible." "Risotto," I said. He came into the kitchen carrying the wet smell of the city. He shrugged off his coat, loosened his collar, and gave me the smile that had once made me feel like the most interesting woman in any room. "You spoil me," he said. I turned the burner down and picked up my phone. "What's this charge?" He glanced at it. One glance. the kind a guilty man gives when he's already rehearsed his expression. What charge? The Whitmore, $1,140 this afternoon. He took the phone, looked at it for 2 full seconds, handed it back. That's not possible. It's on our statement. Must be a pending authorization from something else. He went to the refrigerator and poured himself sparkling water, perfectly relaxed. You probably misread it. Claire. The word misread landed lightly, almost kindly. That was how it always started with Daniel. Not loudly, never loudly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't get defensive. He just adjusted the frame around what I was saying, slightly, quietly, until the thing I was pointing at looked like something other than what it was. I didn't misread it, I said. He sighed gently. You've been working nonstop for 2 months. You're exhausted. You're seeing things that aren't… Daniel. There. He paused, looked at me with that patient, sorrowful expression. I was in a leadership offsite from noon until 6. I can forward you the calendar invite. I didn't answer. He crossed the room and touched my face, just briefly, just enough. I'm worried about you, he said softly, genuinely. And here's the thing about being gaslit by someone who loves you, or someone who has learned to perform love very convincingly. It doesn't hit you like a truck. It seeps in slowly, like water through old grout, following the cracks that were already there. I was 47 years old. I had built a 20-year career on the ability to tell truth from fabrication. I sat on ethics boards. I advised companies on internal fraud. And standing in that kitchen, I spent exactly 4 seconds wondering if I had misread the statement. 4 seconds was all he needed. Fine, I said. I'll look at it again later. He kissed my forehead. That's my girl. We ate dinner. He told me a story about a difficult board member and made me laugh exactly twice. Then he cleared the table and loaded the dishwasher without being asked, because Daniel Archer always knew when a small kindness would buy him the most ground. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked the statement again. The charge was gone. Not reversed, not pending. Gone. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark with my phone screen lighting the room blue-white, and I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the season. I knew what I had seen, and I knew, with the same certainty I used when I sat across from CFOs in depositions, that what had just happened was not confusion. It was a test. He was checking to see how easily I could be talked out of my own eyes. What followed was a winter I don't fully have words for. Not dramatic, not explosive. That's what makes it hard to describe to people who haven't lived it. It was quiet. Quiet in the way that a slow leak is quiet. You don't hear the water. You just notice, after a while, that the floor beneath you has gone soft. Daniel started staying late 4 nights a week. Client dinners, he said, board prep, regulatory reviews. He became careful with his phone in a way he had never been before, angling the screen when I walked by, taking calls in the garage, setting it face down on surfaces with the precise care of a man who had recently updated his threat assessment. I noticed. I said nothing. I started keeping notes. Not because I had a plan, not yet, because I needed proof that my own memory still worked. I wrote down dates. I photographed where I left my keys before I left them, because twice in 3 weeks they appeared in rooms I hadn't visited. I took screenshots of credit card statements the moment I saw something unusual, because twice those statements changed between my seeing them and going back to check. I started sleeping less, and Daniel noticed that too. You look tired, he would say, with so much tenderness it could pass for love. You need to slow down. I'm worried about you. Claire, genuinely. He said that word a lot. Genuinely, as if the adverb could do the work his eyes couldn't. You're not thinking straight. You've been so stressed. I think you should talk to Dr. Mercer, just to have someone to process things with. Each sentence was soft. Each sentence was reasonable. Each sentence moved the camera slightly off-center, so that by the time I tried to point at what I'd seen, I was already describing something slightly different. By October, I had started to question myself. Not completely, not in the way he wanted, but enough that I hesitated before speaking, enough that I heard his voice in my head before I reached for my phone. "Are you sure? Are you sure that's what you saw?" That almost doubt was the most dangerous thing he ever planted in me, because I let it live there long enough to make me slow down. And slowing down was the only thing that let me see the full picture. The thing that finally snapped me out of it wasn't romantic. It wasn't a text message. It wasn't perfume on a shirt collar. It wasn't a selfie that appeared in the wrong folder. It was a receipt in the pocket of a charcoal suit. A Sunday morning in November, Daniel was in the shower, I was sorting dry cleaning, moving through the bedroom on autopilot, pulling items from the ottoman where he dumped his work clothes. I reached into the breast pocket of his charcoal jacket and found a folded slip of paper. Sinclair Jewelers, Michigan Avenue. One item, custom setting, diamond tennis bracelet, $16,400. I stood in the middle of our bedroom in my robe and read that number 4 times. My birthday was in July. Our anniversary was in April. Christmas was still 6 weeks away. And in 17 years of marriage, Daniel Archer had never once spent $16,000 on me without first delivering a 15-minute speech about financial discipline and the importance of living within our means even when we technically didn't have to. I folded the receipt and put it back in the pocket. I went and made coffee. When Daniel came downstairs toweling his hair, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the receipt laid flat in front of me. He stopped when he saw it. Just a fraction, just a hitch in his step that most people would have missed. "What's that?" he asked. I looked up. "You tell me." He sat down across from me. He looked at the receipt. He gave a short, disbelieving laugh, the kind reserved for situations he wanted to make me feel silly for raising. "Oh, that." He reached for his coffee mug. "Corporate gift. One of our investors closed a major deal this quarter. His wife has a birthday next week. The firm gifts sometimes. The firm gifts $16,000 diamond bracelets. It's not as unusual as you think at that level." He said it with the quiet authority of a man explaining the world to someone who doesn't quite understand it yet. "It was last minute. Sinclair gift wraps for us." I held his eyes. "Do you want to try that again?" Something moved behind his face, went still. Then came the look, the patient, sorrowful concern of a man married to someone who has been unwell for a while. "Evelyn." He used my full name when he wanted me to feel like a child. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "I'm asking why you spent $16,000 on jewelry and hid the receipt. You weren't supposed to be going through my pockets." The deflection was so clean it almost impressed me. Suddenly the question wasn't about the receipt. It was about my searching, my boundary crossing, my suspicion. I let the silence stretch. "I'm going to the Hartley Foundation Gala next week," I said. He blinked. "What?" "The charity gala. Meridian has a table. I'd like to come." A half second too long before his answer. "Of course. I'll add you to the reservation." I picked up the receipt and put it in the pocket of my robe. Then I poured my coffee and left the kitchen before he could say another word. That afternoon, while Daniel watched football in the den and assumed the subject was closed, I looked up the Hartley Foundation Gala photos from the previous year's event. Page 3 of the results. A wide-angle shot of the ballroom, donors in black tie, candlelight on crystal. And there, near the edge of the frame, Serena Walsh Daniels' executive assistant, 32 years old, glossy blonde hair, a black silk dress laughing at something, one hand raised near her face. On her wrist, a diamond bracelet that caught the light like it was trying to be seen. I closed the laptop. I sat in my office for a long time without moving. Then I opened a new spreadsheet and started building a timeline. I want to explain something about how I think, because it matters for what comes next. When I investigate corporate fraud, I don't start with the person. I start with the pattern. People lie. People misremember. People rationalize. But numbers are harder to gaslight. A transfer either happened or it didn't. A vendor either exists or it doesn't. A signature either matches or it doesn't. So when I turned my attention to my husband, I did what I always do. I followed the money. Daniel had been careless in the way powerful people get careless when they've gone unchallenged for too long. He kept his phone locked and his work accounts secured. But the financial trail, the vendor payments, the expense reports, the corporate reimbursements that moved through accounts I could access was sloppier than he probably realized. I pulled 3 months of corporate records from sources I am not going to name, because I prefer to keep my professional license. What I found wasn't subtle. There was a consulting firm called Callaway Group, clean name, professional sounding, billing Meridian Pharma $18,000 here, $25,000 there, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic internal audit review. The kind of billing pattern that looks like normal vendor activity until you map it chronologically and notice that payments consistently increase in the weeks following major Meridian contract wins. Callaway Group had no website, no LinkedIn presence, no Better Business Bureau listing. Its registered address was a shipping store in a strip mall in Naperville. The registered agent on the state filing S. Walsh. I stared at that name for a long time. I pulled 4 more entities connected to the same address. 3 of them had the same agent. One had a different name, but the registered email domain matched a personal account I found attached to Serena Walsh's old freelance portfolio from 2019. By midnight, I had traced over $2.3 million. Fake consulting contracts, padded project reimbursements, vendor invoices for services that were either never rendered or wildly inflated. Every approval trail led back to one signature: Daniel Archer, Senior VP of Finance. My husband. I sat back in my office chair and felt something settle over me that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief. It was clarity. This wasn't a man having an affair. Affairs are about desire, weakness, ego, the ordinary failures of intimacy that destroy marriages every day. This was architecture. This was a man who had built a parallel financial structure using his mistress as a front, was actively defrauding his company out of millions, and had for the better part of a year been quietly and methodically convincing the woman who shared his home that she was too tired, too emotional, and too unstable to trust her own judgment. That last part wasn't accidental. That was preparation. I called my friend Nadia Chen the next morning. She was an ER doctor with a dry sense of humor and zero tolerance for what she called men behaving expensively. She had been my closest friend for 15 years and the only person I trusted completely. We met at a quiet hotel bar near her hospital, between her shifts. She listened without interrupting, both hands around a mug of tea, her dark hair pinned up in the practical way of someone who spends 12 hours on her feet and has no patience for anything that isn't real. When I finished, she set down her mug and looked at me for a long moment. "Claire," she said, "I need you to hear how that sounds when someone else says it out loud." "I know." "No." She leaned forward. "I mean, really hear it. Your husband has been stealing millions from his company. He's been running the money through his girlfriend, and for an entire year he has been making you feel like you're losing your mind." "Yes." "That's not an affair. That's a campaign." I looked at the foam dissolving in my untouched latte. "I know." She studied me the way she studied patients clinically, but with real care underneath. "What are you going to do?" I thought about the shell companies. I thought about Serena Walsh in that ballroom photo. Diamond on her wrist, laughing. I thought about Daniel's voice in the dark. "You're not thinking straight." "Sweetheart, I'm going to let him make his move," I said. Nadia's eyes narrowed. That sounds like the kind of sentence people say right before they end up on a true crime podcast. "I'm not going to do anything reckless." She looked at me for a long time. Then she exhaled. "Tell me the rest." So I did. Daniel brought up the trip over dinner, 2 weeks after the Hartley Gala. He had been warmer than usual all week, more attentive. He brought home flowers twice, which he had not done since the first year of our marriage. He asked about my cases with genuine-sounding interest. He refilled my wine before I asked. He was preparing something. I could feel it the way you feel weather changing, not in any single detail, but in the overall pressure of the air. "I've been thinking," he said, over Chilean sea bass and a bottle of white wine he'd brought up from the cellar, "that we need to get away." I set down my fork. "Where?" London first. I have a board presentation I can't reschedule, but after that, he smiled, relaxed, generous. The Maldives. 10 days, just the two of us. Just the two of us. When? I asked. End of the month. I poured my wine. What about Serena? His expression didn't change. He was very good. What about her? Is she going to London for the board meeting? He gave me the patient look, the slightly tired look of a man who has answered this kind of question too many times. She's handling some financial deliverables for the board chair. She'll fly separately, take a return flight from London. She won't be joining us afterward. So she's on our flight. On the same flight. Yes, Claire. He set down his fork and covered my hand with his. I'm trying here. I'm trying to take us somewhere we can breathe again, somewhere you can rest. There it was. Somewhere you can rest. After months of being told I was exhausted, unstable, not thinking straight, the trip was his solution. An island, a beautiful room, a controlled environment where I would be far from home, far from my files, far from anyone who knew my name, and apparently traveling with his mistress on the first leg. The lie was so brazen it almost circled back to being impressive. I smiled. That sounds lovely, I said, and I started planning. I won't pretend the next 2 weeks were easy. I was building a case against my own husband in the evenings while having dinner with him at night, sleeping beside him, passing him coffee in the morning, watching him believe he was managing me. He thought I had accepted the trip as an olive branch. He thought the warmth I gave him back was forgiveness. What it was information. Every dinner conversation I had with him in those 2 weeks told me something else about what he was planning. The way he asked about my carry-on size. The way he mentioned twice that I should leave room for shopping in London. The way he casually asked whether I'd packed my passport in my bag or in my coat. He was very interested in my luggage. I became very interested in that interest. 8 days before the flight, I had a long phone call with my divorce attorney, a woman named Patricia Vance, who had represented me once before in a contract dispute and had a reputation for being quietly devastating. I walked her through what I had, what I suspected, and what I was going to do. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Claire, if this goes where I think it's going, you need to be the one who stays on the right side of the law. I intend to. That means no unauthorized access to sealed systems. I know. That means every piece of evidence has a documented chain of custody. I know. And it means that if you find something in your own luggage, in your own home, you have the right to document it. I know that too. Another pause. Then, all right, call me the minute you land, whichever city that ends up being. I told her I would. The night before our flight, I packed exactly the woman Daniel expected me to be. I moved slowly through our bedroom, folding silk blouses and cashmere into my carry-on with the distracted care of someone trying to hold a marriage together. I put out the passport wallet he'd given me for our anniversary, my initials embossed in gold on the cover. I packed the small bottle of lavender sleep spray I always used on flights. I placed my mother's pearl earrings in the outside pocket. Every detail was deliberate. Every detail was bait. Daniel watched from the doorway. Tie loosened, jacket off. You're overpacking, he said. It's November, I said. I like options. He smiled, came into the room, kissed the top of my head. Get some sleep tonight. You've looked worn out all week. I'll be fine. That's my girl. He squeezed my shoulder once and went to check his own bag. I watched him leave, and then I stood alone in the bedroom with my suitcase in the lamplight. My girl. He had used that phrase so many times over 17 years. Early on, it had felt like warmth being claimed by someone in the safe, intimate way. Later, I understood it differently. He used it most often when he wanted me agreeable. When he wanted me to stop asking questions and smile and let the conversation end where he needed it to end. My girl. Right before the redirect. My girl. Right before the dismissal. My girl. Right before he rearranged reality and asked me to find it familiar. I zipped the inner compartment of my suitcase and went to wash my face. By 11:30, the house was quiet. November pressed against the windows. Daniel slept on his back, one arm above his head, breathing with the deep ease of a man who believed tomorrow was his. I lay beside him in the dark and waited. The clock on my nightstand read 1:47, then 2:04, then 2:09. At 2:13, Daniel moved. I kept my eyes barely open, my breathing slow, my right hand loose against the pillow. The mattress shifted. I heard him stand, heard his feet cross the carpet, not toward the bathroom, but toward the suitcase by the dresser. He knelt beside it. In the thin light from the hallway, I could make out the shape of him, working carefully, unhurried. A front compartment opened, then a sound I hadn't expected but recognized immediately when I heard it. The whisper of a blade through fabric. He was cutting into the lining. I felt something go very still inside me, not fear, something colder and cleaner than fear. The particular stillness of a person who has just had their worst suspicion confirmed and has to decide, in that exact moment, whether to react or to finish what they started. I chose to finish. The cutting stopped. I heard a soft weight being eased into place. Then the zipper. Slow. A pause. Stillness. I knew he was checking whether I had moved, listening for any change in my breathing. I gave him nothing. He came back to bed. He settled. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened back into sleep. I waited 20 more. Then I carried my suitcase into my home office, locked the door behind me, and sat down at my desk under the lamp. The damage was easy to find. He'd made a neat cut along the inner frame seam and smoothed the lining back over it. I peeled it back with my fingernails and reached inside. Cold metal. The case was about the size of a hardback novel. Matte gray, biometric latch with a backup key slot. Heavy, deliberately anonymous. I set it on the desk. Then I opened my toolkit, the compact one I kept for computer hardware, and got to work. People who underestimate calm women always make the same mistake. They think composure means softness. They think if you don't raise your voice, you must not know how to break things open. What they don't understand is that some of us are quiet because silence is how we hear the machinery underneath. The biometric latch required a registered fingerprint. The key slot didn't. I used 2 picks, an tension wrench, and the same patience I had used on a locked filing cabinet during a fraud investigation in St. Louis 4 years ago. It took 11 minutes. When the latch clicked, the sound was so small it felt like an insult. I lifted the lid. Inside were 2 items. The first was a vacuum-sealed pouch containing several smaller packets of white powder, professionally wrapped, labeled in chemical shorthand I didn't recognize. I didn't need to recognize it. I knew what it was, or what it was meant to look like. Either way, it was the kind of thing that ruins a life before the details get sorted out. The second item was a slim, black flash drive, nestled in the foam lining beneath the packets. I sat very still for a moment. Then, I reached for the drive. My laptop hummed. The drive mounted in seconds. I opened the folder. What I found made me press my palm flat against the desk to keep from standing up. Spreadsheets, dozens of them. Transfer records from Meridian Pharma accounts into the shell vendors I had already identified. Internal memos, forged authorization trails, expense approvals bearing digital signatures. My digital signatures. My name on draft consulting agreements I had never seen. My name in email chains suggesting I had privately advised Daniel on moving money off book for tax efficiency. A scan note in a font designed to look like my handwriting, discussing asset concealment. A complete narrative in which I was the architect. The drugs would make me dangerous. The drive would make me guilty. And Daniel the grieving, bewildered husband of a forensic investigator who had apparently cracked under professional stress, would become the man left behind, available to answer questions with wounded dignity, free to keep the money, free to step into whatever version of his life he had been building while I disappeared behind a set of federal charges. I closed my eyes, not because I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed, but closing my eyes wasn't surrender. It was the thing I do when anger comes early. I give it a room to live in for exactly 60 seconds, and then I closed the door on it. Because anger makes you clumsy, and I could not afford clumsy. When I opened my eyes, I copied everything from the drive to an encrypted external backup, then to a second secure cloud folder under a name Daniel would never search. I photographed the interior of the case. I photographed the slit in my suitcase lining. I photographed the case closed and open, and from every angle. Then I sent a time-stamped evidence package to an email account that only Nadia knew existed. Subject line, if anything happens to me, open this immediately. I sat back and thought. Calling the police that night would have been emotionally satisfying and strategically disastrous. Daniel would deny everything. He would say he had no idea where the case came from. He would say I had been acting erratic for months, and he would have a year's worth of incidents carefully curated to support exactly that claim. The therapy suggestions, the gentle concern, the pattern of a worried husband and an unstable wife. It might unravel eventually, but by the time it did, he would have moved assets, warned Serena, destroyed what I hadn't found yet. Number. If I wanted the truth to survive him, I needed him to finish his move. I looked at the case on my desk. I looked at my reflection in the dark office window. 47 years old, barefoot, silk pajamas, the ruins of my marriage spread out under a desk lamp. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Serena Walsh had insisted on joining us at the airport hotel the night before the flight. Per Daniel, she needed to complete an early handoff of board materials before they departed. That meant her luggage would be in the same suite, the same car, the same premium check-in line. Daniel had chosen proximity because he thought it meant control. What it actually gave me was access. She arrived at the hotel suite at 7 the previous evening, cream leather weekender over one shoulder, smelling like amber and something floral. She shook my hand with both of hers and told me she was so glad we were all traveling together because it would make the handoff so much smoother. I smiled and said, of course. After dinner, the suite arranged into predictable geography. Daniel took a call in the bedroom. Serena set her bag near the entryway and went to find the ice machine. I was in the living area, laptop open, appearing to check email. I was very fast. I did not open her bag fully. I didn't need to. The interior side pocket on a weekender that size has a hidden zip compartment that most people forget about or don't use. I had confirmed as much that afternoon while browsing the brand's website. It took less than 2 minutes. When Serena came back with her ice bucket, I was exactly where she had left me. Long day, she asked, with the practiced sympathy of someone who has spent years learning which expressions land best. Very, I said. But tomorrow will be interesting. She smiled. I'm sure it will. I smiled back and said nothing. By dawn, I had resealed the suitcase lining, repacked everything exactly as Daniel expected to find it, and laid down beside my sleeping husband for the last 2 hours before the alarm. He kissed my shoulder when it went off. Morning. Beautiful. I smiled. I'm very good at smiling. Harrington International at 6:40 in the morning smells like roasted coffee and floor disinfectant, and the specific kind of anxiety people feel when they're leaving their ordinary lives for a few days and can't quite decide whether that's a relief or a threat. The terminal glowed with that expensive, cold light that makes everyone look either exhausted or dishonest. In Daniel's case, it was both. I stood beside him holding my latte, coat over one arm, watching him check my suitcase with his eyes every 40 seconds. Relax, he said, too casually. We're ahead of schedule. I'm perfectly relaxed, I said. He smiled and kissed my temple. That's all I want this weekend. No stress, just you and me. And the woman 10 feet behind us who's been wearing the bracelet you bought her. Serena stepped up to our lane with her cream leather weekender and gave me a small wave. She had the practiced poise of a woman who had spent over a year navigating the particular social geometry of being someone's mistress, half apologetic, half proprietorial. She still thought she was on the winning side. The line moved. Somewhere behind us, a child was crying. An overhead announcement called boarding for a flight to Boston. A TSA agent guided an elderly couple through the body scanner with the kind of tired kindness you only find in airports and hospitals. Then the atmosphere shifted. A handler came in from the far left of the checkpoint, German Shepherd at his side, lean, focused, black and tan fur bright under the fluorescence, moving with the particular contained purpose of an animal that knows exactly what it's looking for. Beside me, Daniel went still, not visibly. He was never sloppy enough for that, but I felt it the way his body tightened, the way his breathing paused, the way the air around him sharpened. The dog had not been part of the plan, not this plan. But in Daniel's plan, it wouldn't have needed to be. In Daniel's plan, the bag on the belt was mine. My suitcase went through the scanner first. I stepped through the body scanner, arms raised, no alarm. On the other side, I collected my shoes and coat and watched the belt emerge. My suitcase rolled out. The officer glanced at the monitor, waved it through. I reached for the handle. Beside me, I heard Daniel stop breathing. I pulled my bag off the belt and turned to face him. The expression on his face just for 1/2 second before he forced it down was the most honest thing I had ever seen from him. Confusion, disbelief, the particular white shock of a man watching something that should be impossible happen anyway. Then the German Shepherd walked past me, past Daniel, past the stroller near the wall and the pile of carry-ons at the secondary table, straight to Serena Walsh's cream leather weekender, and sat down. Hard, still, certain. The handler's expression changed instantly. "Ma'am, step to the side, please." Everything happened at once. 2 officers moved in from the adjacent lane. A 3rd agent pulled Serena's bag off the belt and placed it on the inspection table. Serena gave a short, brittle laugh, the kind people use when they're still trying to force a situation back into something manageable, and looked around as if the room would agree with her. "There must be some mistake," she said. "That's my bag. I packed it myself." "Step back, ma'am." She took a step toward Daniel. He took one forward and then stopped himself. His body made the decision before his brain caught it. A 2nd agent shifted subtly to block his line to the table. I stood a few feet away with my coffee and my coat and watched my husband try to calculate whether involvement or distance would save him faster. Neither would. He had to know that. But Daniel Archer had been surviving on performance for 17 years, and performance was all he had left. "Sir," one of the officers said to him, "do you know this woman?" "She's my employee," he said, calm, steady. "She handles executive materials for our company. I'm sure whatever this is, I need everyone to stay back." The officer reached into the side compartment of Serena's weekender, frowned. "Sir, I'm going to need another table." Serena's head turned sharply. "Why?" No one answered. The officer lifted out the matte gray case with both hands, set it on the inspection table under the fluorescent light. Daniel's face emptied. Not pale, not tightened, emptied. Every practiced expression the warm CEO concern, the patient husband, the mild amusement, the gentle disappointment fell away simultaneously, leaving something raw and ugly underneath. He knew that case. He had held it with his own hands at 2 a.m. He had slipped it into the frame of my suitcase with the careful, practiced ease of a man who had rehearsed the motion until it felt smooth. And now it was sitting on an inspection table next to his mistress. Serena looked from the case to Daniel and back again. "What is that?" The officer pulled on examination gloves. "Who packed this bag?" "I did," Serena said quickly. I packed it myself. I don't know what that is. I've never seen it before in my life." "Have you been separated from your luggage at any point this morning?" "No, She stopped, started again. "At the hotel, maybe, for a few minutes, but I was just down the hall, Grant." She caught herself. Used Daniel's middle name, the one she used when she forgot to be careful. "Daniel, tell them this is a mistake." Daniel looked at her with something I had never expected to see from him: open contempt. Not guilt, not fear. Contempt. Because even now, in this airport, watching his plan collapse in real time, His primary feeling was irritation that she had put him in this position. She had always been a container for his risk, that was all. And now the container was inconvenient. "I don't know what you packed," he said. The words hit her like a physical blow. She blinked. Then her face changed all the polish, all the expensive confidence, all the performance of the woman who wore the bracelet and lived in the penthouse and believed she had chosen the winning team. It slid off at once, leaving someone much younger and much more frightened underneath. "You can't be serious," she said. "I told you to handle your own luggage." "Grant," she said his name aloud and didn't even try to catch it this time. "What is happening?" That was when I heard a voice behind me. "Morning." I turned. Marcus Webb was 6'2", broad-shouldered, and built like a man who had been underestimated by people with desk jobs for most of his professional life. He worked airport security investigations on the federal side. He was also married to Nadia, which meant he had seen me at enough dinners and hospital fundraisers over the years to know exactly how I looked when I was angry. Right now, I wasn't. He showed his credentials to the officers, took in the scene in 3 seconds, and then looked at me. "Mrs. Archer." "Marcus." Daniel's gaze moved between us. "You know each other." Marcus ignored him. His eyes found mine and held them. "You all right?" "Yes," I said. "At the moment, yes." That settled something in him. I saw it. He turned to the officers. "Continue your screening." The case was opened under controlled procedure 60 seconds later. The vacuum-sealed packets came out first. Serena made a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a word, just sound, just the noise a person makes when the floor disappears beneath them. Grant went the color of old paper. Then the flash drive appeared in the foam lining beneath the packets. And I watched the exact moment he understood. The drugs were catastrophic. But drugs could be denied. Drugs could be misdirected. A good attorney could find angles in a drug case, especially if the contraband had been in a bag that multiple people had access to. A flash drive was different. A flash drive had content. And whatever was on that drive, whatever he had assembled so carefully, with my name and my forged signatures and my fabricated email chains, was now in the hands of federal security officials who would open it on a very different kind of afternoon. "Sir," the officer said to Daniel, "step back from the table." "I haven't touched anything." "Step back anyway." Marcus looked at the drive, then at me. "Mrs. Archer, do you know anything about this case?" And there it was. The moment. I felt Daniel's eyes on me before I saw them, trying to read me, trying to predict me. Would I hedge? Would I stay quiet? Would I play the careful wife and let the institutions take their time? He had built his entire strategy around the version of me he had spent 12 months constructing, the tired, doubting woman who questioned her own eyes, the one who needed his gentle corrections to understand what she was seeing, the one who would hesitate, even now, in the face of a direct question from a federal official, because hesitation had become her default setting. He had built his future around her. She wasn't here. I took my hands out of my coat pockets. "Yes," I said. The word landed in the checkpoint the way a single stone lands in still water. Daniel made a sound, half inhale, half warning. I kept going. "That case was in my suitcase last night," I said. "I watched my husband hide it there at approximately 2 a.m. He cut into the inner lining and slid it into the frame. I removed it after he fell asleep, opened it in my home office, and copied the contents of the flash drive. I photographed the case, the damage to my suitcase, and the interior of the case itself, and I sent a time-stamped evidence package to a secure account before we left for the airport." Marcus didn't interrupt. He held my gaze and let me finish. "The drive contains financial records tied to Meridian Pharma," I said. "Falsified consulting contracts, shell vendor payments, forged approval chains, and documents designed to implicate me as the person directing the fraud. Several of the shell entities route through companies registered to or managed by Ms. Walsh." I looked at Serena then, for the first time since the checkpoint had started shifting. I let myself really look at her. She was pale now, trembling very slightly. She was afraid. And I believed in that moment, that she had not fully understood what she was part of. I believed she had told herself it was just money, just business, just the way powerful men move their resources around. I believed she had been told, repeatedly and convincingly, that she was protected. She had not been protected. She had been used. That was the thing about Daniel. He didn't just use people once. He built systems with them, made them complicit, and then, when the system needed a sacrifice, he found one. "I don't know how much she knows," I said, "but I know what my husband intended to happen at this checkpoint." Daniel found his voice. "This is insane." He looked at the officers, at Marcus, at the walls of the checkpoint as if appealing to the architecture itself. "She broke into a private drive. She moved evidence. She tampered with another passenger's luggage. You're going to take the word of a woman who has been exhausted," I said. He stopped. "Not thinking straight, Elle," I said, spiraling too stressed to trust her own instincts. The color drained from his face in a slow, even wave. "You can say it," I said. "You've had a lot of practice." A long moment passed. The checkpoint hummed around us. A boarding announcement came and went, somewhere behind us. Someone's carry-on wheels squeaked across the tile floor. Daniel looked at me, not with rage, not with anything I had expected, with a look so raw and disbelieving that for one brief, strange second, he looked young, not innocent, never innocent, but young in the way men do when the world stops agreeing to their version of things. He had not thought I would fight like this. He had genuinely, truly, after 17 years of watching me work, not thought I would fight like this. Marcus turned to the agents. "Separate interviews. Digital hold on the drive." Then, quieter. To the officer nearest Daniel. "I'll need a coordinator for federal referral. There are corporate fraud indicators on that drive that will require chain of custody documentation. Halcyon Meridian." The name triggered the right response in the right offices. Daniel asked for his attorney. Then he told the agent I was having a mental health episode. Neither landed. They never land, in the end, when the paperwork is already in the room. When they walked him away, he turned once and looked back at me across the length of the checkpoint. I had expected fury. I had prepared myself for fury. What I saw instead was the disbelief of a man watching a magic trick he thought he understood, and realizing too late that he had never seen it from the right angle. They took Serena in a different direction. She was crying not the composed, strategic kind, but the full-body kind that leaves mascara in streaks and takes a long time to stop. I didn't follow her with my eyes. Whatever came next for her would be determined by what she knew and what she could prove. That wasn't my accounting to settle. I stood alone in the middle of the security checkpoint. Adrenaline leaving my body in slow, careful waves, the overhead lights still fluorescent, the conveyor belt still humming. The morning still early and cold, and completely indifferent to the fact that my marriage had just ended 20 feet from the C concourse body scanner. Marcus came back after a while. He handed me a paper cup of water. "You okay?" he said. I took it. "I will be." He looked at me the way Nadia always looked at me, with the specific kind of concern that says, "I see you. Not just what you're performing right now. Dana's going to be furious I didn't call her the second this started," he said. A laugh escaped me, small and shaky and real. "Tell her she'll get the full story over dinner," I said. He nodded, then quietly, "What you just did in there, the documentation, the timeline, the chain of custody, that's not something most people would think to do at 2 a.m. while their husband is in the next room." I looked down at the paper cup in my hand. "I've been doing this job a long time." "Yeah," he said, "I know." I canceled the London flight. I called my daughter, Mara. Before the news could reach her through anyone else's voice, she answered on the second ring, still half asleep in her apartment in Portland. I told her as calmly and completely as I could. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Mom, are you okay? Where are you right now?" "I'm at the airport," I said. "I'm coming home." "I'll be there by tonight," she said. "You don't have to." "Mom," Her voice was steady. "I'll be there by tonight." I walked out of Harrington International into the November morning with my suitcase in one hand and my coat buttoned up against the cold. Chicago in November is not a gentle city. The wind comes off the lake like something with an agenda. The sky is that particular shade of gray that isn't threatening, just permanent. Real. I stood at the curb for a minute and breathed it in. Daniel had spent 12 months convincing me I was too tired, too emotional, too distracted to trust what I knew. He had used my own self-doubt as a tool, the way a lockpick uses the shape of the lock. He had needed me uncertain because a certain version of me, the version that had spent 2 decades learning exactly how people hide money and manufacture narratives, was the most dangerous thing in his world. He had been right about that, at least. I thought about the morning he'd told me I was exhausted over a kitchen counter that smelled like risotto. I thought about the receipt in his suit pocket. I thought about the look on his face at 2 a.m, kneeling in the dark beside my suitcase, hands moving with the ease of a man who had decided what kind of person he was going to be. And I thought about the flash drive. All that meticulous, terrible work, all those spreadsheets, all those forged signatures, all that careful architecture of blame sitting now in a federal evidence bag, available to the investigators who would spend the next year unraveling it. With my name on the outside and his fingerprints on the inside. I had not slept in 36 hours. My marriage was over. My life was about to enter a period of legal proceedings, financial untangling, and explanations that would be exhausting to give. But standing at that curb in the November wind, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not relief, exactly. Something quieter than both. Like a window being opened in a house that had been closed up too long. Like breathing. Like finally, after a very long and very quiet war, being allowed to be exactly as sharp as I actually was. My phone buzzed. Nadia. Marcus called. "Are you all right? I have the next 2 days off. I'm bringing food." I smiled at the screen. "I'm all right," I typed back. "Bring the good tea. We have a lot to talk about." I flagged a car, gave the driver my address, sat back against the seat as the airport receded behind me and the city opened up ahead, gray and cold and enormous and entirely real. The world hadn't paused because my life had cracked open. It never does. Flights were still boarding. Coffee was still being steamed. People were still rushing past with their roller bags and their half-finished plans, completely unaware that a marriage had just ended in front of a security scanner. And that was fine. That was exactly fine. Because the world moving forward was the whole point. It meant I could move forward too. There is a particular kind of loneliness in being made to doubt yourself by someone who shares your bed. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with an explanation. It seeps in through the gaps, through the gentle corrections, through the patient concern, through the soft and relentless implication that you are simply not quite well enough to be trusted with your own perceptions. If you have ever lived inside that particular silence, I want you to know something. The clarity comes back. Not all at once, not on a schedule, but it comes. And when it does, it comes back sharper than it was before, the way bones do, the way cities do after something that was supposed to destroy them turns out not to have been enough. I know what I saw. I knew it in September, over a pot of risotto, when the charge appeared on our statement and Daniel looked at me with all that practiced warmth. I knew it in November, in the dark of my home office, with a cracked metal case on my desk and a flash drive full of someone else's version of my life. I knew it at 6:40 in the morning in a security checkpoint at Harrington International, when a German shepherd sat down beside the wrong bag. I always knew. I just needed long enough to see the whole board. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, or tell me whether you would have spotted Daniel sooner than I did. I suspect some of you would have. Some of you have lived a version of this story already. If that's you, I see you. Subscribe and stay close. There are a lot more stories like this one about quiet fights, long odds, and the moment someone finally decides to stop being managed. We'll keep walking this road together.